Today, I'll be talking about time to contact capturing declines in postural control following a fatiguing activity. And so first off, we have to define what postural control is. And so it's defined as the ability to maintain balance and keep the body in a state of equilibrium. And so if someone has poor postural control, essentially they'll have poor stability and they may be more at risk of falls. And so one measurement of postural control is the Advanced Standard Physical Performance Battery, or the SPPB-A. This is an established current clinical assessment, and one portion of it consists of 4 stances where the individual is tasked to hold each stance for 30 seconds or until failure. These 4 stances are the side-by-side stance, the semi-tandem stance, the full tandem stance, and the single leg stance, depicted by the different foot positions shown in these images. However, the SPPB-A only evaluates the time that an individual can actually balance. And so to define the center of pressure, it's the point where the sum of all of the vertical ground reaction forces intersect the support surface. And so a little visual depiction of this is if you have an individual in the side-by-side stance, the center of pressure would fall somewhere between the 2 feet. If they were only balancing on one leg, the center of pressure would fall somewhere underneath that 1 foot. So it's a summation of where the 2 ground reaction forces essentially live within the capture space. Time to contact is defined as the time it would take the center of pressure, given its instantaneous trajectory, to contact a stability boundary. So to calculate time to contact, we use motion capture markers, which are placed in the feet, and we also use a force plate to capture where the center of pressure is. And this time to contact physiologically represents the time it would take an individual to make a postural correction to prevent a fall. And so the center of pressure trajectory looks like this, and if you were to zoom in on it, you would see a line segment that looks similar to this. And so my research question was, are declines in postural control, which are associated with increasing stance difficulty, captured by this metric, time to contact? Because time, which is the only measure that assesses balance in the standard physical performance battery, does not provide data on how the person is actually controlling their posture. It just tells us how long they can hold that posture for. And so my hypothesis is that time to contact will decrease with increasing difficulty of stance and with fatigue. So for the protocol, we had 3 individuals. They were tasked to hold 4 different balance stances for 30 seconds or until they were going to fall. If they were going to fall, they could catch themselves in order to prevent injury. We had them do this on a force plate to generate the center of pressure trajectory within a motion capture volume so we could detect where the feet were in that space. We then had them walk on a treadmill for 30 minutes, which was previously found to induce knee extensor muscle fatigue in both younger and older adults. And then we had them repeat the 4 different balance stances. So to calculate time to contact, there's been this quadratic equation that's been established, which takes into account the acceleration, the velocity, and the position of the center of pressure, and also the slope of the boundary. There's also a time parameter tau within this equation, which you solve for at every instance over the trial, which gives you the time to contact with the nearest boundary of the center of pressure trajectory. And so to visualize, we have the center of pressure here, we have the support boundary, and at every instance over the trial, whichever direction and the time it takes the center of pressure to contact one of these stability boundaries is assigned to that time metric tau. However, what's really important to remember is that smaller time to contact indicates less postural control. And so we calculated both mean and minimum time to contact for each trial. We then ran a one-way ANOVA to assess differences in time to contact between the different stances. And we also looked at effect sizes to assess the effect of the 30-minute treadmill walk on these time to contact scores. So first off, it's important to note that all participants were able to maintain balance in each stance for the full 30 seconds. However, if you look at the time to contact values, they decline as the postural control position declines in stability. And so from the side-by-side stance up to the single leg, this is decline in stability, and that's captured by this time to contact metric as these values are declining in both mean and minimum. And for effect sizes, there's a nil effect of the side-by-side stance, a moderate effect of the semi-tandem and full tandem stance, and a minimal effect of the fatigue protocol on the single leg stance. So to conclude, time, which is the current measure in the standard physical performance battery, is not sensitive enough to changes in postural control. However, time to contact does capture these declines in postural control, which are associated with increased task demand. Simple stances such as the side-by-side stance are not influenced by fatigue, and some more challenging stances should be used in clinical assessments. And the major take-home message is that time to contact may provide the necessary data to quantify postural control, which is important, especially in older adults who experience aging-related declines in stability and who are ultimately at higher risk of falling. However, clinically meaningful differences in time to contact must be established before we can actually use these in a clinical setting. And so I'd like to thank my colleagues on the project and the NIH for the funding. And with that, I can take any questions.
Thanks so much, Ross. That was great. I got so wrapped up in what you were saying, I forgot to give you a 1-minute warning, and you still came in right on.
That's okay.
Hello, Ross. You have several questions in the chat. So first question is, people would like to know about the characteristics of your participants. What was their age, their gender, their activity level?
So in this study, we're recruiting all sedentary individuals. This group of individuals came from the young group. So these are age 30 to 40, I believe. So they're considered to be younger adults. And I forgot the other specific that you were asking about.
What were their genders? So they were young adults, fairly sedentary, and what?
There were 2 females and 1 male.
Okay. Another question that you have is how many participants? So you say you have 3 participants in the study, but do you have multiple measures from each of the participants?
Yes. So in terms of balance metrics, yes, we also have measurements such as the velocity of the center of pressure, acceleration of the center of pressure, range. We also have metrics of their gait as well, and strength of their quadriceps muscles.
We have a few more questions for you. Was there a maximum amount of time where you cut people off who just were able to keep their position for an extended time?
Yeah, so they were tasked to hold the stance for 30 seconds, and all the participants were able to maintain that balanced stance for the full 30 seconds. And so if we're just basing their postural control off of this metric of time, it really doesn't capture how they're controlling their posture. And so that's why this time to contact metric is important, because it allows us to actually look at where the center of pressure is in relation to the stability boundary, and not only just observe how long they can actually hold a particular stance for.
Also, another question, could you speculate on how these results might be altered by those with or without nutritional deficiencies?
That's an interesting question. That's a great question too. I would assume that nutritional deficiencies would have some correlation with someone's muscle activity and how well they can activate their muscles and essentially hold their posture. So it would be an interesting question, or an interesting metric to record, to ask about nutritional deficiencies. My guess would be that if they're nutritionally deficient in an extreme scenario, their postural control would be greatly affected, especially in the stances other than the side-by-side stance. So I would guess that this time to contact metric would really go down in nutritionally deficient individuals. But again, we would have to ask them if they are about their nutrition to understand that question.
Any other questions? I might just take introducer's prerogative and just ask you where next in terms of, are you expanding it, or are you addressing specific other populations, or trying to get men versus women, or see if there's any differences?
Yeah, so with COVID, unfortunately, we haven't been able to have older adults into the lab, but we're hoping to be able to have them in with the vaccine rolling out and things like that. So it's actually safer to have them in. So we're going to be looking at the postural control in older adults as well. And this is part of a larger project, which is trying to understand how muscle fatigue impacts individuals. So I would expect that these effect sizes would be much larger in older individuals based off of the fatiguing protocol.
Great, thank you. That was wonderful.
Thanks.
Okay,